They know how to balance this complex, kind of eerie and dark sound with something that is very much easy to digest, but is still deep when it comes to the emotional connection. Hello there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're coming back to one of my favorite bands ever. This time around we're gonna be analyzing a track from Alice in Chains. The track in question is Check My Brain from the fantastic album that is Black Gives Way to Blue. And this is an album that I happen to be a huge fan of. I love it. Why? Well, because the music itself is fantastic, but also it takes me back to a particular period of my life. So it's very important to me in an emotional level, but also it's a very, very great sounding record that has plenty of great songs. And this one is one of the songs that actually allowed the track, well, the record itself to become popular, somewhat popular. I want to believe that's my headcanon, because I know how popular Alice in Chains is at this stage or was back in the day. So this is a good sounding track and also it's a great mix. So we're gonna be analyzing it together. So here we go. But before we go, if this is your first time on the channel, I welcome you because in here we analyze the music that we love from the perspective of an active musician and professional music producer, but using language that everybody can understand in a way to expand knowledge when it comes to music production, songwriting, and of course music appreciation. So if this is your jam, let's rock and roll. Here we go. So here we go, Check My Brain by Alice in Chains. Sorry for interrupting, but you know the drill. The first thing that I would like to point out is that the insanely powerful, punchy, and menacing sound of the drums and the bass together, don't you think? They sound super heavy and ballsy, but still kind of retaining quite a lot of personality and plenty of definition. This is not necessarily a super complex piece of music, particularly when it comes to the rhythmic section, but it's very consistent, punchy. What's the word that I'm looking for? Stable, if that makes sense to you. Consistency would be the word that I would use to describe it, in all fairness. Because the drums are super steady sounding, keeping the pacing correctly, but also driving the energy forward. One thing that I like to point out is also at the use of effects. We're already getting into that already, because the vocals have not that much effect when compared to the snare. The snare is plentiful when it comes to the use of reverb, and reverb is the effect that we use to create this sound. Reverb. Okay? And as you can tell, it's creating this kind of extra ambience to the sound. And it's something that we use to recreate the sound of a space through the use of artificial methods, okay? You'll see that the snare, every time that it hits, sounds gigantic. And it's part of what creates this massive sound when it comes to the drums. Since the snare action is not that consistent, it's kind of self-contained, every hit matters and you feel it. That's one of the reasons why the entirety of the song feels that massive. Now, the guitar tone, great, don't you think? Jerry Cantrell has a great taste when it comes to designing his heavy sounds, because even though it's super high gainy, super hairy sounding, there is plenty of detail and character. I like it a lot. And also the composition is very interesting, because if you think about it, most of the track is very kind of dissonant, a little bit kind of weird sounding, kind of stressful to a certain degree, the verses. But the choruses are extremely sing-alongy, very radio friendly and catchy. And it's that contrast that I think is what makes Alice in Chains such a great band. They know how to balance this complex, kind of eerie and dark sound with something that is very much easy to digest, but still deep when it comes to the emotional connection. Well, that might be just my opinion, being the huge fanboy that I am. Another thing, of course, the vocals, because if I recall correctly, this album is the first time that the second singer, please remind me his name. I only know that, or maybe vaguely remember that his last name is Duval, something like that. He's great. He's fantastic. He somehow manages to keep the sound of Layne Staley present in the sound of Alice in Chains. Not that not it's not him. He's not replacing him, of course, but his vocal style is similar enough for the sound of the band to keep still be present in the mix, but also evolving, taking it to, well, adding his own personality to the whole thing. Fantastic, and of course the use of the harmonies, the vocal harmonies from start to finish is, well, probably the one of the most Alice in Chainy thing you can do when it comes to producing rock music. So all in all, fantastic sounding. I want you to pay attention before I press play. I will like to drive your attention to the tone of the kick drum. Try to define it. Tell me if it's heavy, if it's beefy, if it sounds like a plastic ball, or if it sounds like a big pan. Try to use any form of language that allows you to describe the sound of the kick, because it's not a bad sound, it's actually very good. But I'm trying to, well, I would like to hear your opinion, because I will dissect, what I mean with this once I come back to you. So pay attention to the sound of the kick, please, okay? Here we go.
I walk these streets a creeping fog. Oh yeah. When she sang, I answered the call. Oh yeah. California, I'm fine. Somebody check my brain. California's alright. Somebody check my brain. Tears that fill my bones. Years expended
Sorry for interrupting once again, but you know the drill. Could you tell what I was trying to draw your attention towards when it comes to kick drum? To my ears, it sounds rounded. What do I mean by that? It has plenty of heft to it. It feels, I can feel the air being pushed by the kick drum every time that it's been kicked. But also I can hear a little bit of the attack of it without being clicky. That's why in my head it sounds kind of round. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Please share with me what do you think about that, and what would be the words you would use to describe this, because that actually helps, especially when you're trying to learn how to analyze sound. Starting or using words to describe it, regardless of how weird it might sound, allows your brain to develop a much more clear idea of what kind of sounds you're looking at, okay, or listening to. Okay. Now, I also try to draw your attention to the sound or the use of effects on the vocals, especially when the super dense verses are taking place. You get plenty of guitar action. It's very loud and prominent in the mix. Of course, it's Alice in Chains. You gotta sound like that, right? But even though it's super big and loud, the guitars are not necessarily taking all of the oxygen out of the mix. When you are balancing the volume of a mix, one of the things that you have to always keep in mind is how much of something is being present or is part of the sound. Why? Because you are limited to the amount of sound that it's going to be understood by your listener at the end of the mix. Everything has been summed from the amount of channels, each of the different instruments or recordings you're dealing with will be summed up at the end as a stereo pair, which is what you hear on a stereo setup, at least when it comes to stereo mixes, okay? Atmos is a completely different thing. But being this a stereo mix, that space, those two channels are gonna be cramped in by the entirety of the mix. So depending on what you push forward, you're basically speaking in a very simple way, taking space out of the occupying the space that it's available for the entirety of the mix by something, and that means that something else won't fit in. Does that make sense? I hope it does. It's kind of difficult to explain, but in this case, the guitars being this massive, in mind that the guitars are actually occupying a lot of space in the mix, the vocals are still quite intelligible. It's easy to understand what they're singing, and especially the use of effects at the end of the phrases. You'll see that they have a little bit of a like a reverb style of thing, but also a little bit of delay. Which delay is this? Delay. Simply put, creating repetition of my voice. Okay, and in this case, you have that blend that only takes place, or at least it's only audible when those sections, when they finish off the verses, the final lines. Now, let's take a look at the screen. Over here we got Decibel, which is the tool that we use to describe or analyze music through the use of a visual medium. The first section that we're going to be analyzing is this area over here. This is the frequency range analyzer. And in here, we can see how loud each of the different frequencies that are parts of the human hearing range, which stands for 20, all the way down to 20,000 hertz, have been across or throughout the entirety of the song, and is being displayed or presented to us by this white line, which stands for the highest point in volume of each of those frequencies. That was a mouthful. Yeah, good. Now, as you can tell, and as I pointed out at the beginning, plenty of low end. This is a very punchy, ballsy sounding mix, and this is most of what the kick drum and bass together combo are gonna be. Is where you can hear them the loudest, and this is something interesting. You'll see that we don't have that big of a difference when it comes to the mid-range, especially the low mids over here, because the mid-range is where we get the beefiness of the guitar tone. It's kind of, yeah, you know what I mean. I don't know what kind of words to describe it, but it's so heavy, still defined and present that this blend between both, it's what makes this album sound so good. Then we got not that much of energy on the high end. Why? This is one of those records that I would describe through the use of the word warm, because we don't have that much of an intense high end. This is when something has plenty of high end, our human ears usually understand that as being a little bit more defined. The issue is that if you add too much of it, you start to make it sound a little bit kind of ear piercing, of course, but also sizzling. Okay, and this record, normally you will see this slope being present in basically every mix, but in this case we have a very much look where it begins, almost at 3K, which stands for 3000 hertz. This is where most of the sound of the guitar, the aggression, will be found, the cymbals, and also a good chunk of the vocals, especially the not the register of the sound of the vocals, okay, not how high they are singing when it comes to the notes. What I mean is this section, okay, which is what allows for a singer voice feel a little bit more defined, okay. But the sound of the singing is fantastic, right? It's because of the tone. What I'm trying to point your attention towards with this is how this album has this cozy feeling. Even though this is a banger of a song, it's a very heavy, punchy, and also straight to the point. It feels cozy, don't you think? And it's due to this. The mix is very much towards that direction. Why? Maybe the concept of the album. This being dedicated to Layne Staley, and also the title track, which is a beautiful ballad, is the one that probably decided the route for this album to be developed in the way it was. Okay. Now let's take a look at the second section of the analyzer. This is the dynamic range, and in here we're going to see how loud the sound of the song has been throughout time. This blue blob represents the loudness, and this is important because dynamic range stands for the interaction between, or the relationship between, the lowest point in volume with the highest point in volume throughout time of any given signal. And in this case, depending on how loud it is, our attention or the way that we're going to understand the song is going to change. Because when something is quiet, it becomes more intimate and much more personal, but also a little bit mysterious and a little bit kind of ethereal to a certain degree. But when something is loud, it becomes intense, dramatic, attention-grabbing, but also kind of, you know what I mean, too much. So this interaction between the loud parts with the low parts is what makes or breaks a record. And in here, you can see that our track begins very quietly, due to the, of course, this is the guitar section at the beginning. And if I recall correctly, it's only one guitar coming from one side. And it's a little bit kind of roll off in the highs and a little bit roll off in the lows, giving that radio kind of like effect. But by doing so, you're also reducing the output of the sound, the perceived loudness. So here's where the drums join, and see how loud it became. Very much a jump of gigantic proportions. That's why it slams and it hits you harder and you begin to headbang. But see the chorus, damn! The difference between the intro when compared to the chorus is stupidly big. Important, because that's why California, you start to bang to the song even more, because it's catchy, but also it's more impactful and energetic. And again, you do this when mixing because you're trying to project or add a little bit of that live element to the recording that will happen when the band gets excited, when you hit the chorus and you start to sing louder, right? Even I'm speaking faster due to that. Now, the second section over here is where we're going to see the second half, and you'll see what used to be the one of the highest points in volume for the record became the standard, and the chorus, the second chorus, is not as impactful as the first one. Look, loudness-wise, but here's where they did that beautiful modulation that took us into the guitar solo. Well, it's not the guitar solo, instrumental section, because it's much more of a band thing. Beautiful and very well done, and that's what allows the track from becoming boring and dull. You see? Having that dynamism. Also, well, this track is very interesting because it's kind of dissonant for the most part. It's very kind of eerie and weird. So let's finish this off and then we give our final comments. Here we go. Excellent, right? It kind of reminds me a little bit, at least the final section, to Man in the Box when it comes to the punchiness, right? Of course, it's a completely different bass. It's a completely different song. Even the emotional impact of both tracks are completely different. But I mean from an aesthetic perspective, okay? Because Man in the Box is a completely different thing. But you got plenty of the Alice in Chains isms that are super present in this song, that are also very much what makes Man in the Box the song it is. That's my opinion. Please tell me which song do you think is better. I kind of foresee already the answers, but whatever. This track, as I stated at the beginning of this video, is not this track, this album in particular, has a special place in my heart because it takes me back to a particular period in my life in which everything looked very differently. And the track itself, this, if I recall correctly, was the first, what's the name of this? Single for the album, so it was part of the promotional material. And believe it or not, I listened to this one later. The first track I actually listened to from this album for the first time was Back Gives Way to Blue, the title track. Why? Because it's a very sad sounding, slow paced, kind of extremely sentimental but honest track that is basically speaking the kind of stuff that I always flock over. Is the I am a huge sucker for sad sounding music, and that track is beautiful. If you want me to analyze that one as well, I will. I decided to pick this one first because it was the first single, but both of them are fantastic. Of course, I prefer the other one better. But this is a very good track, super fun. I can imagine this being a hit live, super punchy, good crowd pleaser. Easy to sing along, plenty of energy, plenty of action, and also punchiness. And the mix itself, as I stated several times, I think it's a very good sounding mix, and it's not a super loud mix as well, because this being from the later part of the loudness war is not one of its victims. It sounds proper. It has dynamic range. It has plenty of character. It breathes. Totally recommended. This album is a fantastic piece of music. Don't know how popular it is among the Alice in Chains fan base, but I think it's a very good pick. And I would even recommend this one as a starting point if you want to get into the band as well. Of course, Dirt is a better album, but this is very close to that one, in my opinion. So please let me know what you think about that. So if you happen to enjoy this, please let me know by clicking on the like button underneath, because believe it or not, well, that's probably the most important thing you can do in order to support this channel. And also, well, by leaving a comment. Even if you just want to tell me how much my taste in music sucks, please let me know, because that helps as well, okay? So, as usual, as every single time that I meet you, I gotta remind you that you should never let anybody tell you what to dream about, and remember that I will see you when I see you.